As the rain and the snow falls down from the heavens and waters the earth and seed, so the words of my mouth will not return empty, but do what I purpose and lead you in peace. Come to me, all you who thirst, come and drink the living water. Let those without money still purchase and drink. Listen carefully to me, that your soul may live forever. Your soul will delight in what I have to give. As the rain and the snow falls down from the heavens and waters the earth and sea, so the words of my mouth will not return empty, but do what I purpose and lead you in peace. Oh, that we might know the Lord, let us follow through to know Him. He'll come like the spring rains that water the earth. As the rain and the snow falls down from the heavens and waters the earth and seed, so the words of my mouth will not return empty, but do what I purpose and lead you in peace. Seek the Lord while He is near. Call on Him and He'll have mercy. His thoughts are not your thoughts, His ways not like yours. Call on Him while He is near, for He said He'll freely pardon. Sinner, turn from your ways, turn toward me. As the rain and the snow falls down from the heavens and waters the earth and seed, so the words of my mouth will not return empty, but do what I purpose and lead you to me.
In a world of deceit, telling the truth is a revolutionary act. It's the David Knight Show.
As the clock strikes 13, it's Thursday, the 30th of July, year of our Lord 2026. Well, we have the Fauci contemptible GOP show, and I say contemptible because the GOP is burying the lead. Yes, once again, they're hiding the key issues, not only in Fauci's life, but also in our lives as well. And what is going on with this? We're going to talk about what they're hiding and what they're trying to distract us from. Meanwhile, we've got a lot of people who are jumping ship after Trump says, well, I'm going to honor Biden's pardon for Fauci. What a surprise. Who would have thought that, right? And as we are inching closer to a disastrous bloodbath for the U.S. In terms of helping Israel and Iran, we'll take a look at what this tax and spend New York City Democrat has done to the global economy and to our economy as well. We had the Fed make their decisions yesterday. We'll take a look at what happened. There is a major stock market panic that is going on in Korea. Will that spread? We'll be right back. Well, we begin with one contradiction that I think is very important, and that is, well, actually a couple of contradictions, one of them economic, one of them moral. After Planned Parenthood closures, there's now a renewal of taxpayer funding. This is from World Magazine, a Christian publication. What they don't talk about is the fact that not only is Trump and the Republican Party, basically they're finished with a head fake about supporting being pro-life in terms of abortion. And it is a head fake because if you're not pro-life in terms of having only justified wars, in terms of not attacking civilians, in terms of not going after children, then that is ultimately hypocrisy. But at the same time, what they don't talk about is, and maybe it happened after they went to press with this article here, but the Trump yesterday, not only has the Republican Party restored taxpayer funding to Planned Parenthood, but Trump has cut Medicare Part D. How about that? Now that's the supplementary drug subsidy for seniors as part of Medicare. And when you look at this, of course, he was hardcore. I'm not going to touch Medicare. They all are, right? And none of these programs, I don't want to get here, grabbing over the socialist crumbs, fighting other people about this. These are unconstitutional things. It is unconstitutional to give money to Planned Parenthood. It is unconstitutional to have Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, but they charge us our entire life for that. That's the way I view it. A lot of people attacked Ayn Rand because she had pushed back against socialism and against subsidies and everything. She said, they hit me pretty hard all of my working life with these taxes. I mean, I take them out in payroll taxes. It's about 15% tax, and there's no deductions or anything. It's just a straight tax. I mean, look at that's including the employer's contribution, which the employer knows is a cost of your labor. And so that's about 15.5%, I think is what it is total with the two. But you do pay for that. And now they're going to kick this to the curb so they can give money to Planned Parenthood. And why is Trump caring about Medicare and Medicaid anyway? He's been the person who has added more to the deficit than any other single president. And so it's not constitutional. And but it also shows the priorities of the pro-life president and the pro-life organizations. Even in this article, where they're talking about Planned Parenthood and the GOP and abortion, they start singing the praises of Lindsey Graham yet again. Planned Parenthood closed roughly 9% of its locations nationwide after the provision in last summer's big, beautiful bill nonsense blocked Medicaid funding from going to abortion providers. But that provision expired last week. The GOP couldn't do anything about it. They were too busy doing, I guess, show trials or wars or whatever. They couldn't do anything about fixing that. Pro-lifers are calling on legislators to block the funding yet again. They warn that some Planned Parenthood locations will now receive more funding in states that allocated money during the federal freeze. So they'll actually get more money. Some of the states actually made up the shortfall from the federal government. And so now they'll have that increased funding. Plus, they'll get the funding back that the Republicans cut last year for show. At least 54 out of nearly 600 Planned Parenthood locations across the country have closed. This is the Trump administration froze some Title X grants. Again, that funding is now back as well. So there's a lawsuit. They just gave up on it, quietly gave up on it. People didn't realize that they had walked away from it, the Trump administration, for about a month or so because they didn't announce it. They have big fanfare and they go to all these pro-life rallies, talk about how pro-life they are. Then they give billions of dollars to Israel to commit genocide against civilians for years. One of the things I think is interesting about this is they said, according to Planned Parenthood, abortion only accounts for about 4% of its services. You know, we looked at the casualties in terms of Gaza, and it was far more than 4% of the people killed being children, right? And the reasons for that are because they're far more vulnerable to all the different types of things that happen, the bombs, the falling buildings, and things like that. So they're weaker, they're more vulnerable, and so they have a higher casualty rate. I think it was somewhere around 20% or something. Here you have a situation Planned Parenthood said, well, you know, only 4% of our clients come here to kill a baby, and we help them do that. But we're helping Israel to kill 20% of the casualties are children, and it's a massive number of casualties. That we
also, it's worth pointing out about Planned Parenthood. Memory serves, what they do is they itemize basically every little thing. You come in, you get an aspirin. Oh, that's part of their services. You come in, you take some of their free condoms or whatever. That's part of their services. So the abortion is really all they do.
That's right.
That's basically all they do. They just sit there and they bill you, or they itemize every little thing that they can to build up this giant list of other stuff that doesn't really matter.
Well, they have a new profit center now, and that is transgender drugs and things like that. So there's that.
Oh, boy.
But yeah, you're right, Travis. And they didn't even point that out, and I didn't catch that either. Thank you for bringing that up. There's no way to separate Planned Parenthood from abortion, said the director for Susan B. Anthony, Pro-Life America. Now, this is where I don't know if it was this person or somebody else of the organization, but it was a leader of the organization that went to honor Lindsey Graham, one of the biggest abortionists ever. Like I said, why did you go to speak at the funeral of Kermit Gosnell and eulogize him? I don't think so. But you do it for Lindsey Graham. Now the Medicaid dollars are flowing again, except Trump is going to cut off the Medicare dollars for seniors. Because, you know, we got to worry about the budget, right? They never worry about the budget. That's the problem. We got $40 trillion is where it's going to be by the time we get to September. So, all right, 39.5 and counting. And here we are at the end of July. And so it's going to be $40 trillion soon. I can give you $40 trillion. Why? Your taxes don't matter. But they claim that they do. And why they split these hairs. It's about who they want to help and their agenda. It's not about any fiscal responsibility at all. And then they had this to say. This is the Senate Budget Committee chairman. It was Lindsey Graham who's the Senate Budget Committee chairman. But this is South Carolina Citizens for Life president, who also spoke on behalf of Lindsey Graham, said, "We have lost a leader for the pro-life movement who is in a position to speak into this." Think about that. A hero of the pro-life movement. There's something deeply wrong with the pro-life movement, folks, if this is what they're cheering Lindsey Graham. Graham had for years backed and voted for pro-life legislation aimed at keeping taxpayer dollars away from abortion providers. After his death, pro-life groups issued statements mourning his passing. As even Trump himself said, yeah, he was a hawk. He never saw a war he didn't like. We're killing all the right people, right? Who are the right people? Who are you to decide who to kill? Who are you to go on wars of aggression and assassinations?
Lindsey Graham wanted to keep the kids alive, so until they got to about 18, so we could then ship them off to die later.
That's
You know,
right.
he's more into the slow kill.
That's right. He doesn't care about the lives of Americans either. Doesn't care about the life of American military. Doesn't care about kids in other countries. No, he is not pro-life. Pro-life, very narrowly and hypocritically defined, is what we're talking about here. They said it remains unclear if any of these facilities or closed locations will reopen. One person said, I hope Planned Parenthood doesn't reopen just because they're getting Medicaid dollars. If they do, then we pray for them. And we should be praying already. Well, how about praying that the war does not reopen into new fronts? How about praying that the war closes down and not just Planned Parenthood clinics? How about that? And yet it's Lindsey Graham, the pro-life senator, who wants to see the war expand. He would love to see a world war. That's his legacy, as a matter of fact. Neil Gorsuch got a lot of press for his statements that the U.S. was never supposed to be about one race or one religion. Well, I agree with that. And it was not supposed to be about one denomination. It was never supposed, the government should have no interest in the details of how you worship God. And nevertheless, we can't escape the argument that what this is really about is not about whether people are going to be Catholic or Amish or Baptist or Presbyterian. It's not about that at all. It's about the fact that Christianity is unique in the sense that it is not about one race. And so that's what's different about America. That's what's different about the Declaration of Independence. That basic thread of Christianity that is really what influences government. That's what government's responsibility is. Government's responsibility is to protect our liberty. Government's responsibility is to treat us all equally, not to play favorites based on ethnicity, not to play favorites based on some tribe. And Christianity is the only religion that does that. And it was the ethics and the morality of this country when it was created. That is the issue. And it's a bit troubling that Gorsuch feels like he needs to speak out against it. You know, we're not talking about an official state church. That type of thing, the same guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson, when he said all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with inalienable rights, we create governments to protect those rights, and when they become abusive, it is the duty and the right of the people to alter or abolish that government. The same guy who did that was adamant that he didn't want to have an official state church. And what did that mean? That meant that, and I don't know what it was in Virginia, maybe it's Presbyterian. That would mean that in those particular locations, you would have to either attend a Presbyterian church, or at the very least, you would have to pay to support it. And I've used this argument in opposition to government schools, because I believe that government is education is fundamentally about religion. It's about your religious worldview. And I find it as abhorrent that I have to pay for these schools, as Jefferson found it abhorrent that somebody would have to pay for a church whose doctrines they did not believe. It's exactly the same thing. And I've made that case many times. I made it when we go to, every time I would see the Jefferson impersonator who was always in Colonial Williamsburg, I would always make that case in the crowd. I would say, you pushed for government to subsidize education, and yet that has resulted in many places, because he'd always play a thing. Well, where are you from? You're from, I don't know about North Carolina or whatever. He would try to pretend that he was back in that time, of course. And I said, well, there are places where they have done this, and this is what it looks like, because education is fundamentally about your religious value. So you wind up forcing people to practice a religion that is alien to them, or at the very least, to pay for that religion that they reject. That's what we're talking about. That's the limited presence of government. That's government's sphere, is to make sure we got a level playing field, that we don't discriminate against one race or one people, ethnic group against another. And yet it has been used to do exactly that. You know, we look at the idea of a caste system. We have the Hindus with their caste system. We have the Muslims who denigrate people who are not Muslims. They call them kafir, unbelievers, infidels, or whatever, but you are lesser than they are and despised by them. You have the Jews, basically, who think that everybody except for them is a lower form of human, if they're human at all.
That explains why Hollywood runs on a caste system.
I thought it was the couch system, the casting couch. Yeah, so it is. It's kind of, what was that guy?
Harvey Weinstein.
Weinstein, yeah, that's what.
Remember,
he wants,
it's
Hollywood.
important to get your morals from Harvey Weinstein.
That's right.
Absorb everything Hollywood puts out. Adopt it. Let it influence you.
Yeah, Mira Sorvino, she had her career destroyed because she didn't go to his casting couch. She was going to be Arwen in Lord of the Rings, and he stopped her career, right? It's not just like, you criticize us, you won't ever work in this town again. You don't come to my casting couch, you won't ever work in this town again. That's the reality. And that happened to her right after she had won an Oscar. Anyway, getting back to this, that is what is just different about the Christian religion. Christian religion is why I say it is antithetical to dispensationalism. Christ did not come to elevate an ethnic group. Absolutely did not come to do that. He came to level the playing field. He came to bless every nation on earth, every people group. That is the fundamental difference between Christianity and all the rest of these religions. And that's where Western civilization and this idea of a level playing field where we don't respect individual persons, that's where that comes from. The natural instinct of humanity is to help people who are like you and to see them as better and different than everybody else. And yet, when you go back and look at the evolutionists, Charles Darwin went through and he broke humanity into, in his opinion, 3 different races, right? And of course, his race was the highest one. The Asians would do the same thing, and they make their race the highest one. That is a natural human tendency. Christ came to work against our natural human tendencies. And the Western civilization and governments that we have are a reflection of that Christian teaching and of no other. You won't find that in any of these other religions or cultures. They're exactly the opposite. And so J.D. Vance said, well, I'm not saying you have to be a Christian to be American. I'm saying something simpler and truer. Christianity is America's creed, the shared moral language from the Revolution to the Civil War and beyond. And I agree with that. I just don't think that's clear enough. You know, how do Christian values differ from non-Christian values? He's not going to say that because you can't compare and criticize. That's not polite. We can't say that. And yet you have to make that distinction. And so there certainly isn't any lack of people who are willing to criticize Christianity, are there? But we have to play with different rules, right? You can criticize Christians, you can criticize white people, but you can't criticize Israel, even politically, right? Who is it that's making those rules? The same people that gave us critical race theory. The American Bolsheviks, the liberal Jews who run these institutions from the top down. They're the ones who create these rules about CRT and about the rest of this stuff. And it is antithetical to what this society is built upon, and it is destroying the society and the foundations of it. Because we're all creatures of God, we must respect each individual's pathway to that God, argued J.D. Vance. And I agree with that. He got that right. But Gorsuch had a different view, pointing out that Charles Carroll, who was also a Catholic, signed the Declaration of Independence along with members of other Christian faiths. He also explained that the Amish and the Quakers settled in the then British colonies. So what does that tell you? This tells you that there is something that is fundamental, that is different. You know, when we're talking about, certainly you can have doctrines, and I'm not saying doctrine doesn't matter. I'm not an ecumenical guy, really. But when it comes to politics, these are not the provision of the government. The government should not get involved in what our relationship to God is, what our salvation is about. Those are the distinctions that separate Christians, but they're united on the understanding of the fact that all nations are made of one blood, that we have a common humanity. That is a Christian biblical view. And that's what we're talking about. It's disturbing that Gorsuch doesn't see this, I think. Different groups, but they all have that fundamental understanding of the nature of man and how government should interact with us. We can have very different understandings about many other things. But that fundamental thing, when we're talking about politics and religion, that is the basis on which our government was built. Then we get to Franklin Graham of Samaritan Spurs. And he's at it again, folks. There's a great article from Brian Shilhavi at Health Impact News. Franklin Graham, who was there to push the fake pandemic, to push the vaccines, in many cases setting it up so people get injected in the churches. And you can't have a church service where you worship God. You got to have a church service where your communion is getting the needle stuck in your arm. Isn't that amazing? I tell you, I'm just done with Samaritan's Purse. I've had situations with it in the past, and churches I've gone to, they would take up collections for Operation Christmas Child. They basically have you donate gifts, and they would deliver them through missionaries or whatever in different countries, just as a gift. And I'm fine with that. And I thought that was a good thing to do in general. I mean, I don't know really how effective that is, but that was not a bad thing to do. But then you saw what they did during the 2020 fake pandemic in New York City, for example. Franklin Graham went in with Samaritan's Purse, and they set up a big field hospital there. Remember, the Army put in a 2,500 bed hospital. They made a big deal out of it. Look, here are all the beds. We've got this for all you people who are going to get sick with this. You're going to be in this bed pretty soon. Trump sent hospital ship to New York City, sent another one to L.A. Those hospital ships left empty in L.A. and New York. Franklin Graham quietly packed up and left. The Army quietly packed up and left their thing because the hospitals were empty. There was no pandemic. It was all a psyop. And he participated in that in a big way. Now, I think he sincerely believed it because he got the jab. And he wound up with pericarditis not long after that, one of the symptoms of the jab. And so I think he just doesn't have any discernment in terms of all this. But he's also profoundly allied, just like his father, with politics. He will suck up to both parties. He always wants to be at the center of power, just like his father. Franklin Graham and his organization, writes Brian Shulhavy, worked hand in hand with Big Pharma and the U.S. government to get involved now with the latest, quote-unquote, pandemic, the Ebola virus outbreak in Africa, and always ingratiating himself to political power. In this particular case, of course, political power is now with Big Pharma.
This picture is wild. This this guard here, I think he's holding an M32 rotary grenade launcher.
I didn't notice that. That is crazy. And he's got a mask on, right? He's ready for any kind of a threat. Biological warfare, you name it. I've got a grenade launcher here.
Also, the fact he's not wearing some kind of actual hazmat gas mask makes me think those might be explosive rounds he's got and not, tear gas or something like that.
I think it's explosive propaganda. I think all of this stuff, if this was a real pandemic, your cloth mask, your N95 mask is not going to help you if you listen to what they say with virology, right? It's all a lie. And so it's all just Fauci says do this, Fauci says do that. It's like a game of Simon Says. None of this stuff makes any logical or scientific sense. They have no proof of their theory, and they're completely inconsistent with their theory. That's why I'm off the reservation. You want to know what I believe? Go read the book, The Last Pandemic, by Sam Bailey and her husband. I always forget his name. I remember hers because Sam is an unusual name for a woman. Samantha is really her name. But I always remember her name, but I forget her husband. They're both MDs. And they have talked about the phony science of virology and the many ways that they lied and misled us and all this. Now they're doing it again. And of course, Franklin Graham has put his organization at the epicenter of this. This is what Brian Shulhavy is talking about at healthimpact.com. He says they have quarantined American aid workers supposedly exposed to the virus in Kenya, even though they have no symptoms. There we go again, right? They don't even necessarily have to have a PCR test, I guess, either. In direct defiance of the Kenya High Court's ruling to stop these military-style quarantine camps being put in by the U.S., what the U.S. has decided is that if you're coming from the area where a lot of people are sick, the Democratic Republic of Congo, you have to go to a third country. They have picked Kenya to be the third country. And so they put in a lot of these military quarantine camps and said, okay, well, if you're somebody we think might be sick with this deadly disease, we're going to send you to Kenya. Kenyans say, we don't want that. And Franklin Graham has got his
Did they say,
people there.
can you not?
Yeah, I don't know what they say. But they're not happy about that. And yet, when you look at this, there is no pushback against this in terms of What is truly going on here? Brian says, as I've previously reported during the COVID scamdemic, Samaritan's Purse participated in mass COVID-19 vaccine campaigns with the bioweapon, the COVID-19 so-called vaccines, as well as the deadly experimental drug remdesivir. They helped the U.S. government turn Christian churches into vaccine clinics. Many Christians received the deadly shot and drugs right in the church building because, hey, we have to worship Big Pharma and their apostle, Anthony Fauci. In 2021, Franklin Graham told his 9.6 million Facebook followers, I think Jesus Christ would advocate for people using vaccines and medicines. I think that anytime somebody presumes to tell you what Jesus would say about vaccines, you need to run as fast as you can the other direction away from that guy. He claimed to have taken the shot himself and then got pericarditis later that year. That is a hardening of an inflammation and hardening of the outside envelope of the heart. And so it's a pretty serious thing. It's different from myocarditis. Here we are today in 2026 with Americans being quarantined for a quote-unquote virus that produces no symptoms. And with American authorities disregarding the rule of law due to an Ebola pandemic. As 26 is running, we got a rerun this year of what we had 6 years ago. Same script, just different virus. And one that has already been tried to instill fear before. And of course, they did that also, as he points out, with coronavirus in 1999. They scared people to death with that even before they did it in 2020. He said, here's some of my previous coverage on Ebola from past years. He wrote an article about the similarities between the 1976 swine flu hoax and Ebola. Very true. And of course, this is the kind of stuff that also John Rappaport would always focus on. He didn't buy any of these things either. He was on the same page as the Baileys. And by the way, John unfortunately passed away earlier this year, but you can still get his archives. I really do appreciate some faithful supporters of the show who gave me access to those archives. And it truly is amazing how they continue to do the same thing over and over again. Well, when we come back, we're going to take a look at the Fauci show. And folks, it was a show. There's just so many elements of this that are wrong. And it's not about the foreign cleavage and gain of function, all this kind of stuff. I am so sick and tired of seeing that by the alt-stream media. It is a hoax. The GOP and Rand Paul distracted people and misdirected people during the original pandemic. You remember one of the things that he came after Fauci, or Dr. Fauci, you're going to make people vaccine hesitant. Well, I hope he does. This is one of the things that is coming out of this, I think, that is a silver lining. God works in mysterious ways. And so it woke a lot of people up to the corruption, the cynical mass murder that is big pharmaceutical companies. And we may wind up, because they jumped the shark on ivermectin, we might wind up finding a safe and effective cure for cancer because of these people. God does work in mysterious ways, doesn't he? But they attacked him on everything, including him taking the Fifth Amendment, which he did 100 times. We're going to take a quick break at the bottom of the hour here, folks, and we're going to be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Hello, it's me, Volodymyr Zelensky. I'm so tired of wearing these same t-shirts everywhere for years. You'd think with all the billions I've skimmed off America, I could dress better. And I could, if only David Knight would send me one of his beautiful gray MacGuffin hoodies or a new black t-shirt with the MacGuffin logo in blue. But he told me to get lost. Maybe one of you American suckers can buy me some at thedavidknightshow.com. You should be able to buy me several hundred. Those amazing sand-colored microphone hoodies are so beautiful. I'd wear something other than green military cosplay to my various galas and social events. If you want to save on shipping, just put it in the next package of bombs and missiles coming from the USA.
Well, welcome back. And I guess it's appropriate, to have the MacGuffin t-shirt there because we've talked about the MacGuffin being, whatever it is that motivates people, right? Whether is it the Maltese Falcon in the movies, as Hitchcock talked about? It doesn't really matter. Is it the plans for a new bomber? It doesn't matter. What is it that motivates the people? It doesn't matter. We've seen this happening over and over again, whether it's the pandemic or whether it's climate change, and then they push you to the same solution. I would say, in a sense, what we saw with these hearings is a sort of MacGuffin. It is a way to push you down the hill and away from the real source of what all this stuff is, and to divert you away from the criminals who ran this thing through. So, in one sense, it is a bit of a MacGuffin. But before we get back into that, I want to thank some of the people who have left some tips and some comments here. Star Barkley, thank you very much. I appreciate it. She says it's constitutional to support the David Knight Show. You are allowed to do that under the Constitution, at least for the moment, right? We stand for free speech. I don't know how much longer free speech will be there, but yeah, I really do appreciate that. And we're getting very, very close to the end of the month tomorrow. And tomorrow we've got a couple of great interviews we're going to play for you, but I won't be here live. So just make the plea right now. We're very close to the end of the month, and the gas gauge is probably about the lowest that it's ever been in a month. And so we would appreciate your support. If you have any spare nickels and dimes that you can send our way, I appreciate that. Steve Ev says, my Medicaid goes away January the 1st. I never wanted it. I paid into it for 40 years, qualified. Now it goes away. Well, it's the Medicaid Part D, which is the supplementation on drugs. As far as I'm aware, I don't think that there's any other changes to, that you're talking about Medicaid versus Medicare. So there's a lot of different parts to all of this stuff. But I agree, and that's what I was saying earlier, that they're going to restore funding to Planned Parenthood, but they're going to take away drugs for seniors in terms of that subsidy that's there. And again, the federal government should not be subsidizing anything. That's why we've got a $40 trillion deficit. Nevertheless, as you pointed in, a lot of us, we paid into this all of our life, all of our working life. Planned Parenthood didn't pay anything to be able to get money to kill babies. North American House Hippo, good to see you. Thank you very much for the tip. So I just spoke with Mitch McConnell on the phone for 20 minutes. He asked me to send him a case of water, some ice, an air conditioner, a fire extinguisher, and some duct tape. He said, Lindsay won't shut up. That's funny. I got it. Okay, I like that a lot. That's as a matter of fact, when we're talking about Mitch McConnell.
Our top story tonight, Generalissimo Francisco Franco has been critically dead now for 11 weeks. And it's just in from Spain. A medical team has announced that Generalissimo Francisco Franco is still valiantly holding on in his fight to remain dead.
Yeah, and that's still happening in Kentucky as well. That was a long-running joke. Saturday Night Live as they began their run. And you got Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, and of course the Republicans who had a supermajority, put in a couple of years ago, I think in anticipation of this very event, they put in a fact that the governor cannot replace the senator who dies. South Carolina, they replaced Lindsey Graham. And then there's going to be a special election as well. And they're going to have that. They rushed that through because it's a special primary that they rushed through because the election is coming up in November, and his sister wants to run in the primary and beat the other Republicans. She got appointed to the seat, but she wants to run to become a senator for 6 years. The temporary appointment would only take her to January, but if she can win the election, she can stay there for 6 years. So they rushed together a second Republican primary. They already had one, just so they could put her in. I wonder who's going to win. It's a real nail biter, isn't it? We have no idea who's going to win this special election in South Carolina. And of course, they are proud of their native son, Lindsey Graham, and they have named a military base there after him. I'm not sure what the name is going to be. Maybe they'll call it South Carolina Pride in honor of his lifestyle that we all understand. As Travis was saying, each of the military barracks comes its own special closet. Let's talk a little about what happened with Fauci. Nothing says honesty like taking the fifth, says Josh Hawley. Called Fauci a liar because he took the fifth 100 times. Now, let me just say this. I'll defend Fauci on this one, okay? The only thing I'll defend this guy's life work on is the Fifth Amendment. I would suggest that the Fifth Amendment is a good thing. It doesn't make you guilty to say that you're not going to talk to the feds, especially when they're snooping around trying to find something to charge you with. This should always be your inclination. It's a good thing. Don't listen to these Republicans. The Fifth Amendment is a good thing. And if you listen to any lawyer, anybody who tells you, gives you advice about when CPS shows up at your door, probing and looking for something, you don't let them in. As a matter of fact, lawyers will tell you, don't even open the door to talk to the cops. Talk to them through the door and say, if you got a warrant, then show it to me, hold it up to the window or hold it up to the door so that I can see it. But you don't let them inside. If you open up the door, they start looking around for things. And, when he cracked the door, I saw something I thought was suspicious. So I had to go in and fish around even more. You never talk to these people. Never, ever. That's the advice I give you. It's exactly the opposite of Josh Hawley. Everybody wants to say, I got nothing to hide. I'm innocent. So let me explain to you how I'm innocent. And they're always looking to get you in a perjury trap. And of course, Fauci had already been proven to be a liar with his diary. It would have been open season. It would have been like shooting fish in a barrel to get him on a perjury charge. And they'd even said that ahead of time. Did you want to say something, Travis?
Yeah, no, it's just these people are trained to get you. When a cop says, just be honest with me so we can get this over with, he's saying, be honest with me so I can charge you with something. Yeah. He's not there to help you. He's there to charge you with something.
That's right.
The FBI, in these interrogations, you'll see them ask the same question over and over and over, maybe worded slightly differently, because your brain isn't consistent all the time. It might remember something slightly different one way, and then they get you in a process crime. They say, but you said it was this way before. Mm-hmm. And then you've lied to the FBI, not through no fault of your own, but because the brain, memories change. They get hazy.
That's right. You have something slightly contradictory, they've got you. That's what they did to Martha Stewart. I mean, they didn't get her. Everybody thinks they sent Martha Stewart to jail because of insider trading. They didn't. She didn't do insider trading. What they sent her to jail for was a perjury crime. They said that she changed her story, got it inconsistent in a couple of cases. You never talk to these people. That's what the Fifth Amendment is there for. The founders understood the nature of government. They understood the nature of power, and they put that in there for your protection. It's not a bad thing, Josh Hawley, first of all. So getting beyond that, let's talk about the other things that happened at the Senate hearing. And we know from a fact that he was lying because of the diary and because of public statements. You compare what he said publicly, what he's writing privately in the diary, that is the issue. But again, nothing is going to come out of any of this for Fauci. He should go to jail, but there's many, many other people who should as well. And a lot of those people who should be going to jail are using Fauci as their shield, as their scapegoat. If he's going to go to jail for lying to the public in major ways like this, that would be something for the Department of Justice to pursue. But the best that the Senate can ever do is to have a referral to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice is not going to do that. And Trump showed that in spades yesterday. He got a lot of people upset with him because of what he said. So the GOP sphere is totally outraged. And so the only thing that he hasn't really done wrong is about the Fifth Amendment. What about talking instead of the Fifth Amendment? Why does Josh Hawley and Rand Paul talk about the lockdowns? Why don't they talk about the masks? Why don't they talk about the real bioweapon, the mRNA? Why don't they go back and talk about the 1986 Act? Why don't they talk about all the kids that have died because of these childhood vaccines with SIDS, and the ones who've had their lives destroyed with autism, and the parents who've had their lives destroyed with autism? No mention of that. They're not going to come after him. And of course, Rand Paul's not going to come after him for remdesivir because Rand Paul profited from remdesivir. He got his wife to buy stock in that company in her name to try to hide it from people. And he doesn't oppose the vaccines. That's one of the things that he shook his finger at Fauci during the fake pandemic. He said, you're going to make the public vaccine skeptics. And he did. And that was a good thing that he did. The only good thing that came out of this. Nobody should ever shy away from the Fifth Amendment. Again, it is a perjury trap in the extreme. I think what Rand Paul is doing by focusing on gain of function while not talking about all the rest of the stuff, I think it's not just grandstanding. I think it's criminal grandstanding. We all know that Fauci is a criminal. Can we admit that the Republicans had a hand in this as well? Not just the Democrats, not just the bad Democrat governors. Trump paid the bad Democrat governors to do what they did. They might have done it for free, probably would have. But he also paid Republican governors to do the types of stuff that they did. Mike DeWine, who set up a lottery, remember that? You feeling lucky, punk? Well, here, you take this shot, I'll give you $1 million. You get into the lottery to win $1 million. How about that? Or you got Brad Little, who shut things down very hard in Idaho, another Republican governor, because he had gotten so much money from the federal government, from Trump at the beginning of all this. And as the Republican legislature in Idaho was going to meet to shut down some of these draconian measures that had been put in by the governor in terms of locking down businesses, in terms of social distancing and masks and all the rest of this garbage, they'd had it. And they wanted to remove that stuff. What did Brad Little, the Republican governor of Idaho, do? He acted like some kind of British colonial governor, and he disbanded the special session. Said, no, you can't meet. And then he put together a piece of legislation that he wanted them to rubber stamp and call them back in. And that, what they said was, if you're a business, you don't have to enforce these things for us. However, if anybody gets sick with this imaginary pandemic and they decide to sue you, you will bear full responsibility in terms of liability. But if you comply with everything I tell you to do, then if somebody gets sick and sues you or thinks that they get sick from this, then we'll protect you from that. You see how that works? That kind of threat and intimidation. That's exactly the kind of economic pressure and incentives that Trump was giving out of Washington, and he just passed it along. So again, to ignore Trump's role in all this is criminal. And it was only just a couple of days ago that Trump put out a social media post praising Rand Paul while he criticized Thomas Massie. Again, wants to drive a wedge between them. Oh, Rand Paul, he's really good. He's really good lately. And so Rand Paul is covering for what Trump did with this show trial. And he's also covering for the vaccine companies. So this is something that I believe was timed to cover people, to distract people away from the $1.25 billion of Pfizer jabs, the Trump shot, what I call the genetic code injection, what other people call the COVID vaccine. But they bought another $1.25 billion of these vaccines, and they did that just last week. Perhaps they knew the timing of this hearing coming up. Nobody's talking about that. And nobody's talking about the vaccine being the bioweapon. When you look at the idiotic influencers on the alt-stream media, it just makes me sick. Everybody's talking about the furry cleavage. And it's like, come on. This is, shows that it's man-made. Look, there's a fur and cleavage there. Oh, really? You're just parroting what people have told you. Have you looked at any of this stuff yourself? Have you seen it? Have they seen it? Again, I just had Christine Massey on a couple of weeks ago. She said, nobody has isolated this. What do they do when they come up with one of these things? They synthesize a sequence, and they said, it looks like this. Well, guess what? Maybe that furin cleavage, if there is such a thing, maybe that was in the genetic sequence that they created and not in anything that was real and created in a gain-of-function lab and then released accidentally or intentionally. How about that? Is that a possibility? Oh, you better believe it is. If they're just going to make up a genetic sequence, they can make one that looks like it's artificial. And then they can plant a lot of information to denials about this and nonsense stories about bat soup and all the rest of the stuff. Folks, none of this is real. And they've got these MAGA alt-stream media people out there outraged. Look at this, gain of function. They did all this stuff and they created a furin cleavage. We got to get these guys. Did you ever notice that nobody is talking about stopping the gain-of-function funding? Is that a tell? I think it is. As I said yesterday, it's just like saying, well, this skyscraper, three skyscrapers, 2 planes, 3 buildings. We had 3 steel skyscrapers that just collapsed into their footprint. Looked like a controlled demolition, but it wasn't. It was simply a natural thing that happens when a steel skyscraper catches fire. Never seen it before, never seen it since. We've seen skyscrapers that have burned for days, and they might even start to sag a little bit, but they don't fall and collapse and free fall into their own footprint. Even days worth of fires. And so there haven't been any changes in the building codes. There haven't been any changes in the way they fight fires, because you had a lot of firefighters who were killed as part of this. They haven't made any changes in that. That's a big smoking gun, folks. Just like the fact that they want to say this is gain of function, gain of function, gain of function, but no changes to the gain of function stuff. What does that tell you? It tells me that this is all just a fake. It's a head fake. It's a distraction. It's to get you, the hounds, off of the scent so we don't start looking at Trump, at Rand Paul, at all the people who covered this stuff up, who knew about it and didn't stop it when it was happening, who were part of it the first time, and they're laying the foundation for it to happen again. So once again, the bioweapon is the big pharma vaccine. And Trump has just spent $1.25 billion. Trump and RFK Jr., of course, Maha, all the rest of that stuff. They just spent over $1 billion to have Pfizer make more of this stuff. They're still killing people. They're still harming people and destroying their lives. And we're not going to talk about that. Instead, they got everybody focused away from Pfizer because there was already starting to build some people starting to talk about that. Now nobody's talking about that. Now they're all talking about Fauci. They're all talking about Wuhan. That's what the point of all this stuff is. And so Trump comes out there and he explains to us that he didn't have anything to do with the bad stuff with COVID, right? He saved people's lives. It was Biden who killed everybody. What happened to that? Oh, wait, here it is. Okay, sorry, I thought that was a clip. Many more people died, he said, under COVID, under the Biden administration, than under the Trump administration. Let me tell you why that is. We've already talked about that. We had an increase in excess deaths under Trump because he was financially incentivizing the hospitals to withhold medical care. If you were sick with something, no matter how bad it was, you couldn't get in the hospital unless it was something that they could, a respiratory disease that they could characterize as COVID. If they did that, they got a $9,000 bonus. If they could put you on a ventilator, they got a $39,000 bonus. If they called you a COVID patient, they get a bonus of 20% on everything that they do. And so that was why we saw an increase in deaths under Trump. But it wasn't, the spike didn't happen until 2021. And it wasn't because of Biden. Yeah, it was because of Biden forcing people to get the jab, twisting their arms, putting all kinds of pressure on them. Whose jab was it? It was the Operation Warp Speed jab. It was Trump's shot. He was the vax daddy. And so it was his shot that killed people in 2021. And they didn't want to have all of this on Donald Trump. So they did the 1-2 step. They took him out, they put in Biden. And now they've got Trump back in to finish the chaos that he began. He's here to create global economic chaos and to create a global war. That is his role in all of this. As a matter of fact, let me get a little bit more of what he had to say here. Operation Warp Speed was a spectacular success. Yeah, he gave Fauci a medal for that, a commendation, if you will. And in fact, many say one of the most successful things ever done by an American president. Is that right? Yeah, the Bill of Rights doesn't matter. None of that stuff matters. Constitution. No, it's Operation Warp Speed. That's the chief achievement of American history. I overrode Fauci on this. No, he didn't. His ideas were crazy. Also, I said from the beginning of the virus came from Wuhan lab in China. No, you didn't. Fauci strongly disagreed, always tried to protect China. I inherited Fauci, who was there since the 1980s, but with each passing day, I relied less and less on him. He made too many bad calls, like on masks. Well, the reality is he says that Biden made him president. But it was Trump who made him president. And I said it at the time. I said, look at this. He has abdicated his position. He's put Fauci up here. And Trump is there to kind of be the comedian. And Fauci is a straight man. Remember, he said, well, maybe we could shine lights into your veins or something. And Fauci's like, oh, this guy's an idiot. And very condescending and critical of Trump. The only person, by the way, who ever got away with that. Anybody else do something like that, Trump would fire him in a heartbeat, and he would come after that person, but not Fauci. What does that tell you? What are Fauci's connections? Again, why does Fauci make more than double what any bureaucrat is supposed to make? Their salaries were capped at $200,000 approximately, a little bit more than that, which was the salary of the vice president. The president gets a $400,000 salary, but Fauci got $430,000. How does he get that? Yeah, he's a special creature, isn't he? He doesn't get fired by Trump for criticizing Trump, for mocking Trump, for telling everybody Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't get, there's no recrimination for that. Instead, Trump gives him a medal. He gets a double-dipped salary because I don't know who is he working for. I've said in the past, is he working for the intelligence agencies as well as the NIAID? None of that was talked about.
There's also the fact that if you inherit something, you don't actually have to keep it. Mm-hmm. You're free to get rid of it at any time. And in fact, the fact you kept anybody on from the previous administration is a black mark on you to start with. You should have seen who Obama was and what he did and the type of people he appointed and said, all right, anybody Obama appointed, immediately out the door.
Well, the reality is that Trump just lies constantly, and he lies to make himself look good. And he doesn't care what the facts say. Look at how many times he's won the Iraq War already. And yet we're locked in a quagmire that people are saying may last for years. And so this is the same thing. This is Operation Warp Speed, his war against us. He's lying about that as well. And he said at the very beginning of this, he said, I had two very smart people explain to me why we had to have these lockdowns. Who were those two smart people? It was Fauci and Dr. Scarf. Remember her? And so where did they get that information? I've talked about this 1,000 times. They had this garbage simulation from the Imperial College of London. They created a computer model. And the computer model, the basis of the computer model was that every person that got infected with this thing was going to pass it on to two other people, right? And it was forever, right? There was no flattening the curve. It was always going to be increasing. And so it defied the basic foundation of virology right there. And then when the University of Edinburgh looked at that simulation from the Imperial College of London, they said, this isn't even good computer code. Every time we run this thing, we get a different answer with the same inputs. And so it's just garbage code. It's like 15,000 lines of Fortran code. And the University of Edinburgh called him out on that. But two very smart people brought that garbage to Trump, Fauci and Burke. And that was his excuse for why he was doing this. And I said, look at this. He's put this little elf on a pedestal. He has made this guy a dictator, a king. You know, Fauci says, do this, you do it. Doesn't matter if there's any justification for law. It's all done under color of law anyway. And yet Trump is back saying Biden made him president. Biden abdicated all of his authority. You did too, pal. You disgusting liar. It's just amazing. And then he topped it off yesterday by saying this.
Well, the only thing you can really think about is the autopen because the most powerful thing a president has, they say, is the power of pardon. So he was pardoned by Biden, and I respect that. I know how powerful it is. It's a very powerful, they say it's literally the most powerful thing a president has. Now, whether or not I sign my things directly, always, almost everything I sign directly. You're witness to many of them.
He doesn't want to quibble over a pardon because he knows he's going to need one from somebody, right? But he also knows that Fauci knows where all the bodies are buried, and he could bring them down with him if they really want to try to go after him. Well, it was a bit too much for some people who have been big fans of President Trump for the longest time. You know, Ben Garrison, for example, who has his cartoons that he does, and I really like Ben. I like him a lot personally. I disagree with him strongly over Trump, but he did this cartoon with Trump, where Trump is shielding, and look at all the people behind Trump. Making America look the other way is up in the top, and behind him is the deep swamp. And the people that Trump are shielding from we the people are Fauci, Bill Gates, the Epstein files, the deep swamp, FBI, CIA, IDF, Israeli war crimes, toxic cereal, sludge and sugar, and insider trading and vaccine mandates. He's shielding everybody that have done and everything that is there in the Ben Garrison cartoon. So good job on that one, Ben. I hardly endorsed that one. For the longest time, I haven't liked his cartoons. And Ben I was so surprised that he fell into the Trump camp, because Ben Garrison was the one who did that great cartoon, showed the left and the right boot, you know, the red and the blue boot and marching, and his caption was the March of Tyranny, left, right, left, right. And folks, that is exactly what they did with all this COVID pandemic. Left, right, march into the police state. It's all a MacGuffin operation. You know, it's kind of interesting. I saw that Alex Jones is getting a lot of attention from the mainstream press because he's calling for the impeachment of Trump finally. And while I was there, it was amazing to watch Alex go off on Trump privately and sometimes even publicly and say, that's it, I'm off the train. I don't have anything to do with this guy again. And then before you know it, he's selling his vaccines as nothing more than sugar water that you can do, because we got the good Trump vaccines. They're not the bad Bill Gates vaccines. And so he's been all over the place with this. But one thing that Alex is really good at is scoping out popular trends and public opinion and how to make money off of those. And I say that the biggest canary in the coal mine has sung when Alex Jones is getting off of the Trump bandwagon. And this has lasted now for a few weeks. And he is screaming at the top of his lungs against Trump all the time now. This is not an on-again, off-again thing like he used to do over and over again. But he is off because he knows, I think, that Trump is declining. You had Nate Silver say that the other day as well, the pollster who's out there looking at that. He said, I think we've seen peak Trump. Well, we can certainly hope that we have seen peak Trump, and we can hope that he will answer, but I don't think he'll answer in this lifetime for what he has done. Somebody who has put us into a bankruptcy situation, like he did his 6 casinos, and yet he's made more money this last year than he did in his previous 60 years combined in his quote-unquote businesses. He's not a businessman. He's a gangster out of New York, and he couldn't even run a casino, which, again, when you look at the gangsters, they weren't really interested in running a casino. They just wanted to do money laundering. Well, we're going to take a quick break, folks, and we will be right back. Stay with us.
You're listening to The David Knight Show.
New World Order in music.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All the unvaccinated are still alive. A little bit of Pfizer in my arm. bit of BioNTech does no harm. A little Johnson Johnson does the trick. A little AstraZeneca so you don't get sick. It's booster number 5.
Yeah. Remember that? Well, you know, there is deafening silence from the Republicans unless they want to talk about foreign cleavage. And there is deafening silence from Vivek Ramaswamy, who, if you remember, he was working with the Republican governor there, Mike DeWine. He's also somebody who is a pharmaceutical bro. He is involved in self-amplifying mRNA. He's always he's a character kind of like what was that guy that everybody went after that in the pharmaceutical thing that I can't describe. Anyway, so some young guy, and he bought some companies and he jacked the price of these drugs.
Martin Shkreli.
Thank you. Yeah, that's pretty good. I wasn't doing a great job of describing him either, but thank you, Travis. Appreciate that. Yeah, he's kind of very much like Martin Shkreli, if you look at his career. And yet he's running for governor. He's already run for president and didn't make it with that. So now he's running for governor. Or,
in fact, sorry to interrupt you, but I want to point out that Vivek's career is actually worse than Martin Shkreli's, because Martin Shkreli bought companies with known drugs that are known to work, that actually do what they say. They might come with the side effects, whatever, you know, Big Pharma has its issues, but some of their drugs do what they say, even if they will cripple you in other ways. Martin Shkreli bought those companies and raised those prices. Vivek bought patents or whatever it was for drugs that didn't work, repackaged them, renamed them along with his mother, and sold them out again and got investors to say, look, we found this new drug.
That's right.
He's a bigger scumbag than Martin Shkreli by a mile.
And here's more proof of what a scumbag Vivek the Snake is. Instead of talking about what's going on with Fauci, and of course he doesn't want to talk about the pandemic because of the role that he played in it, he's out there talking about, he's running for governor, remember, of Ohio. Or is he running for president? And if he's running for governor, why does he need the endorsement of Israel? Unless he's running for president, in which case he's got to have it, right?
Consistent at every step. We will not end aid to Israel until Israel tells us they are ready for it.
Yeah, we won't end aid to them until they tell us that they've had enough, until they tell us, hey, we need you to do this secretly because the American people hate us now after what we've done. So he's talking about that. What role does that play in terms of being governor? And again, we looked at Mamdani becoming mayor of New York. That was one of the things about it. All the press wanted to make it about Israel. It's like, hey, I'm running for mayor of New York. I don't have anything to do with Israel. But no, I don't support that. And no, I'm not going to go there. Not so with Vivek Ramaswamy. That is yet another indication that we are a Zionist-occupied government, if you needed it. And so he's running for president, not really for governor, and he needs Israel's support. As a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting because, you know, over the last couple of days with Netanyahu coming for the Lindsey Graham funeral, and of course to do some backroom deals with President Trump and give him some direction, as Joel Salenti pointed out yesterday, you could tell that he was in town because John Fetterman, the guy who was always called up because he wouldn't dress appropriately for the Senate, you know, he'd show up in shorts, and he would show up in a sweatshirt and a hoodie and all this other kind of stuff as a senator. He was wearing a suit because, you know, the boss, Bibi, is in town. So you got to impress him with that. So the mainstream media is completely tuned out of all of this. They don't even want to report all the lies that were exposed by Fauci in his diaries. In a sense, when you look at this, the diaries were a series of lies and vanity. That's what his diary was filled with. I guess we call it Vanity Fair, or the Vanity Diary, or maybe we call it Vanity Ugly, because it really was pretty ugly. Vanity Fauci. But you had mainstream media completely ignored it. They have, for the longest time, sung the praises of Fauci, literally calling him a hero. Be kind of embarrassing for them to talk about how he was using them to lie to the American public, while privately he was writing what he sincerely believed.
The single most respected voice on the pandemic, it's Dr. Anthony Fauci.
The man who's become known as America's doctor.
The nation's top infectious disease expert, Anthony Fauci.
You are seen to many as a superhero.
Dr. Anthony Fauci,
American hero and New York Yankee fan.
You've done so much for this country in terms of this crisis, so I really appreciate your insight.
Who better to give us answers that we can trust than Dr. Anthony Fauci?
Perfect person to answer our questions today. Joining us now, Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Dr. Anthony Fauci, appreciate your candor.
Dr. Fauci, appreciate the candor.
We appreciate your service to this country.
We appreciate your service.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service.
Greatly appreciate your service to America.
Thank you for your 37 years of service, I believe, to 7 presidents, and thank you for your work over the past year.
The great news is you're sticking around in the Biden administration. We are so grateful to you, Dr. Fauci, for everything you do.
Thank you so much for everything you do.
Thank you very much for everything that you do.
Thanks so much for the work that you do.
Thank you very much for the reassurance and, as always, for all of your public service. Thank you, Dr. Fauci.
Thank you for all your guidance this past year, and it's greatly appreciated.
Dr. Fauci, on behalf of all of our viewers here in the U.S. and around the world, thanks for...
And it goes on and on and on. I didn't put together that supercut. Somebody did. It's good. Now do one with Trump. And all the times that Trump praised Fauci, it would be longer even than that. He gave him a commendation medal at the end. I would have given him a condemnation medal. Condemnation sentence. But
oh no, it wasn't a medal. It was some paper or something like that. That's a very important detail.
Oh yeah, I've had people troll me on that. Oh, he didn't give him a medal. He gave him a condemnation, commendation. Commendation. Thank you. I just can't stop condemning the guy, so I always think of condemnation. But anyway, 37 years of service, and nobody wants to talk about what he did in those 37 years, isn't it? Interesting. I think that's very interesting. The Republicans don't want to talk about what Fauci did in 37 years. And the Republicans don't want to put together a supercut of all the praise that Trump gave him. That would be a good one to do. Supercut of Trump praising Fauci and interspersing it with Fauci mocking Trump, talking about how he doesn't know what he's doing. But of course, it wasn't just the people that you're supposed to take seriously. It's also the comedians who become political commentators. Look at Stephen Colbert, for example. This is, again, we had men with deliberately hairy legs doing like the Rockettes or whatever, wearing vaccine hypodermic needle costumes. And somebody put together this clip. They took one of these ridiculous things that Colbert was doing, and they had the woman they had that shooting in Washington, D.C., and there was a reporter as that was happening. She's live and she goes, "What is that?" And she's looking, she doesn't know the sound of the gunfire, what that is. And so people used her as a meme, putting her in front of Strange Things, and somebody did that. This is my favorite cut of all the Colbert vaccine dances. What is that? That's crazy. What is that? Yeah, I look at this show hearing that's being run by the Republicans and Rand Paul. That's what I see. It's this absurd distraction away from the reality of the crimes. That's what it really amounts to. Under Fauci's NIAID, they issued multiple grants to researchers working at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. This is coming from Reason. And then they get into the fur and cleavage, right? All the rest of this stuff. Yeah, nobody wants to talk about the 1986 Act. They don't want to talk about remdesivir, that he pronounced, that's the standard of care, right? After it had failed, he tried to get it approved for AIDS. He tried to get it approved for Ebola. And everybody said it doesn't do anything except harm people's organs. I think it was the liver, liver or kidney. I can't remember which it was. Basically, it destroyed it. And so then the Chinese government does the same thing, says it's not effective at all with COVID. Well, by that time, Gilead's patent was about to expire for remdesivir. So Fauci comes to the rescue. The World Health Organization took down that report from the Chinese. And within a week, Fauci comes out and says, yes, the standard of care. He just personally did it. They didn't do a study, not at all. They took down the Chinese study that was done, and then he pronounced it the standard of care. And both he and Rand Paul made a lot of money off of that standard of care. Now you've got all the alt-stream media is pushing all this COVID stuff again, the fur and cleavage, and, they're just Useful idiots. Anybody that calls himself an influencer, folks, they're trying to sell you the rope that's going to be used to hang them and to hang you. That's what this is really about. And so they said, one person, for example, said, well, our paper was pretty strong in saying that there's no way this virus was engineered. But now I have less confidence in that statement at this stage because I've seen the furry cleavage. It's like, take them back. I remember How the West Was Won. They had the Walter Brennan character that nearly killed Jimmy Stewart. Yeah, take you back here in the cave and show you the varmint and hit you in the back of the head with it. Yeah, so these guys have seen the varmint. But as I said before, since the virus was not isolated, they could send out any kind of genetic sequence that they wanted. And it's like, oh, well, it looks like that genetic sequence is like something that would not occur naturally. So it must be engineered in the Wuhan lab, therefore, right? No, that is a non sequitur. This is a hoax from start to finish. And they're starting again, and they're going to finish it in the same way. That was just a trial run. What's going to come next will be much worse. They'll have the flock cameras everywhere. And they've already said, well, you know, this whole thing was real, and we did the best we could. Next time, what we're going to do is we're going to go harder, and we're going to do it quicker. And they will do it that way. That's what you should be concerned about. That's what the Republicans are preparing you for. That's what this is all really ultimately about. At another point in the hearing, Republican Senator Bernie Moreno of Ohio asked attendees to stand if they had lost their job. Here we go. This is literal grandstanding, right? Stand up if you lost your job or you were otherwise harmed by COVID-19 policies, including vaccine requirements and school closures. Well, the problem is there's a lot of dead people and a lot who can't stand up, and there's a lot of people who have been disabled because of this and can't stand. One of the people that I interviewed was an orthopedic surgeon whose career was ended because of what happened with the genetic code injection from Operation Warp Speed that Vax Daddy Trump is so happy about. So yeah, all the people that Trump killed with not only his shot, but his hospital incentives and his ventilators and his remdesivir. So about 15 people, says Reason, including Fox News anchor Laura Ingraham, who had been seated behind Fauci in the room, stood up. Some of those who stood up included a Kentucky pediatrician and a representative from Feds for Freedom. I've interviewed them, an anti-vaccine requirement advocacy group, who told CNN after the hearing that they believe the coronavirus leaked from a lab. There you go. You want to lay the foundation for the next one? That's the way you do it. You go out and you get all the conservative libertarian publications to push this narrative that it leaked from the lab, but you're not going to stop any gain-of-function research. You're going to keep running it. They haven't done a thing about any of that. And so all these other things they won't talk about. And they won't talk about vaccine safety and efficacy. They won't talk about the 72 jabs that they want to give to kids. None of that. And you know, it's not even just the childhood vaccine stuff. Here's a guy who talks about the tetanus shot. How common is that? You know, you scratch yourself and you go to the hospital, they want to give you a tetanus shot.
If you step on a rusty nail, you should have had a tetanus shot, right? Well, that's what we've been told. The tetanus shot changed everything for me. It was the last toxin I ever had injected in my body, and it made me so incredibly sick that it forced me to look into what was actually in it. Believe it or not, tetanus vaccines are usually made from rotting organs, something worth knowing if you're vegan or vegetarian. They use cow heart and boil it in water to create an environment for Clostridium tetani, the bacteria that produces the tetanus toxin, to grow. They then neutralize the toxin with formaldehyde and mix it with aluminum adjuvants. No wonder it made me feel like death. Another thing that people should know is that tetanus doesn't even come from rust at all. It actually comes from a bacteria that lives in horse or cow manure and sometimes soil or dust. So unless you're working on a farm or walking barefoot through manure, your risk of tetanus is extremely low. And if you have a milk allergy, the tetanus vaccine contains casein and can cause fatal anaphylaxis, yet most people are never warned about this. Getting the booster every 10 years is also another vaccine schedule joke, as studies have shown that there's no difference in protection between people who get the booster every 10 years versus those who receive it every 30. But here's the wildest part. Even if you're one of the less than 30 cases in the US each year and you actually get exposed through a deep oxygen-deprived wound, an additional shot, which is the protocol, wouldn't even help you because it takes 2 to 7 weeks to build antibodies after the shot. If you're already infected, it's too late. Instead, just take 1 gram of vitamin C, preferably from a whole food source, for 5 to 7 days. In a clinical study, this approach resulted in 100% survival in children with tetanus and significantly reduced mortality in adults. We don't need more vaccines. We need more truth and a little more vitamin C.
Yeah, but of course, Fauci is all about vaccines, isn't he? And that's what the medical community has become all about. You had a Republican Senator, Tommy Tuberville, went on TV and said he killed millions of people. I thought, yeah, that's right, he did. But not talking about the Vaccine Immunity Act of 1986. He's not talking about all the babies that Fauci killed with SIDS. No, he's talking about this gain-of-function myth. The idea that Fauci somehow was responsible for engineering a virus that was leaked or that was deliberately put out. Nobody wants to talk about it. Of course, this Republican Senator Tuberville will not, or Tuberville, I think is the way he pronounces his name. He won't talk about the fact that Vax Daddy, Trump, just gave Pfizer another $1.25 billion because he doesn't want to talk about the fact that the vaccine is a bioweapon at all. Again, they want to make it about Wuhan. So Trump is saying he opposed Fauci's plan to shut down the country. I told you about that. I showed you that clip there. He said, I took Fauci out of play, but Biden made him a king. Nothing could be further from the truth. But of course, we're now on the, how many wars have we had with Iran? Because we keep winning them. I guess that's one of the reasons why the 60-day prohibition doesn't apply to him, because he keeps winning those wars and then they keep restarting. So he's had 30 of them and none of them have lasted more than 60 days, I guess, by his estimation. Senate Republican has now insisted, this is Senator Roger Marshall, said, who didn't have a friend who suffered from the COVID vaccine? Well, I believe that's true. Nevertheless, why don't you complain about this $1.25 billion of more buying of this the same vaccine that you're complaining about? I mean, this is even worse than Tuberville. Tuberville says, no, it wasn't the vaccine, it was the Wuhan lab. But then this guy, Roger Marshall, says, well, the vaccine was horrific. Well, where were you when they appropriated $1.25 billion? Nobody is talking about that. Well, let's talk about another shot besides tetanus. That's a very common one. How about the vitamin K shot that they give babies right after they're born? Well, there's an excellent post that was put up by, this is Valerie Ann, 1970. Listen to what she had to say about this. So babies are born with vitamin K that is low on purpose. It's not a flaw. It's God's perfect design. Why? Well, because cord blood is packed with stem cells, specifically meant to repair the physical stress and micro-trauma of birth. Low vitamin K keeps the blood naturally thin, so those stem cells can flow freely and travel exactly where they're needed, to heal tissue, to support organ repair, to jumpstart the newborn baby's developing systems without premature clotting getting in the way. God designed this so the baby's own cord blood stem cells can circulate optimally in those critical first few moments and hours. Thin blood means maximum mobility for healing. High clotting factors right at birth would slow or would trap those precious stem cells, interfering with God's given job. Low vitamin K ensures that they reach the bone marrow, the thymus, and other sites without clotting interference. Neurological and organ protection from stem cells can migrate to the brain and to vital organs to protect against the oxidative stress of labor and delivery. And then there is the natural timing. Colostrum, that first liquid gold, is rich in vitamin K. Delivered orally, slowly, and gently through breastfeeding exactly when the baby needs it and when the baby can use it. God's perfect dose at the perfect moment. Instead, what we do in the United States is to cut the cord early, stealing up to 30 to 40% of the baby's blood volume and those vital stem cells. Then we inject synthetic vitamin K that's loaded with polysorbate 80, propylene glycol, benzoyl alcohol, and sometimes aluminum, and we do it straight into an immune system that is barely online. Why are we fixing what God has already designed perfectly? Delay the cord clamping, keep the cord blood, and trust colostrum. Respect the design. Your baby's body was fearfully and wonderfully made. But Fauci, as supposedly his vaccines are there to train the immune system, but he would tell you that you don't have any natural immunity. And he would tell you that it's not natural to have vitamin K that is low at birth, but it is natural. And then she talks about the synthetic nature of the vitamin K shot. She says it's not natural vitamin K that comes from food, it is synthetic. It is a chemical toxin with the FDA's hardest black box warning. Think about that. That's the only thing they do after a black box is to ban a drug. But they put a black box warning on a lot of different things, and they don't tell people about it. Synthetic phytonadione is the vitamin K that they use. That's a lab-made chemical. It's not the bioavailable nutrient in greens or in K2 supplements. It forces the blood to clot 9,000 times faster, turning it into sludge and halting natural stem cell repair post-birth. Polysorbate 80 is 200 times more than in the Gardasil vaccine. Think about that. The cross-blood-brain barrier delivers aluminum to the brain. It triggers anaphylaxis, heart issues, and hypersensitivity shocks in many children. So again, this is where we are with medicine in America. And it's people like Fauci who have given us and implemented this horrible system. And the mainstream media that is paid, essentially, they operate on money from Big Pharma. They promote people like Fauci. It is an incestuous system that is designed over the love of money, and it is totally evil. So Fauci is the guy who is the Big Pharma Fauci. He does this for Big Pharma. This doesn't happen in other countries in terms of things like the vitamin K shots. Other countries don't do 72 to 100 of these vaccine mandates that you have. The American Academy of Pediatricians, I think it's racketeering that they're involved in when they do this with the pharmaceutical companies. You don't see that in other countries. It's only here that we see that type of thing. Well, let's take a quick look at what is happening with the war. And of course, we'll begin with Lindsey Graham, and they got a military base named after him. Perhaps we should name the wars after him. I think he'd be more honored by that. He doesn't have much respect for the military personnel because he's always wanting to send them off to die. But perhaps we could call World War III Lindsey's War because it is his masterpiece, something that he set in motion as a servant of Satan, in my opinion. This brood of vipers that we see at his funeral there. Here's the first one of the vipers that really got my attention, and that's Sean Hannity talking about how he is a person of moral clarity.
My perspective was Lindsey had moral clarity. He understood right from wrong, good from evil. And he knew, as President Trump knows, as Israel knows, as I know, there can be no path to peace until evil is defeated. Evil, in this case, embodied in a death cult, an ideology, the world's #1 state sponsor of terror. Thanks to the partnership,
Israel. That's Israel, right?
Minister and many other allies, I pray their days are numbers, and I pray that Lindsey's dream of a lasting peace becomes realized soon. I see President Zelensky is here.
Yeah, he's talking to the death cult right there. He's talking to Zelensky. He's talking to Netanyahu. These two guys connected over their common interest in killing people. These two servants of Satan, these two Ashkenazi Jews, I should say. And there's Sean Hannity talking about a cult of death. We know who the cult of death is. They're in that room. And of course, Donald Trump, right after that, he says, well, he knew right from wrong. He knew good from evil. That's right. He did. And he chose to do evil, and he chose to do wrong. Here's Trump.
He was extremely hawkish. I will tell you, he never saw a war that he didn't like. Only his true friends would understand that, but he wanted it for the good of our country.
Oh, yeah.
Lindsey, he was often
whose country?
Characterized as a warmonger. I've heard that false criticism a lot.
No, he sold war.
The truth was the opposite. Lindsey desperately wanted and talked to the president about a lasting peace in the Middle East.
Nonsense.
He wanted every region.
You have no credibility, Sean. None at all.
On that path to peace.
You're pathetic.
That was Lindsey's dream.
Yeah.
People would only listen to what he had been saying.
We did listen to what he had to say. We've heard what you had to say as well. Look, he sold war. We played the clips for you the last couple of days that were collected by the guy that he had following him around to do a documentary. He was selling war. He was selling it to Trump, selling war for Israel to Trump. A fishmonger is somebody who sells fish. A warmonger is somebody who sells war. Lindsey Graham was a warmonger, a war seller, a traitor to America. His interest was completely in with Israel. I'll be with Israel till the day I die. And he was with Israel. And here's J.D. Vance. So, what do you say at the funeral of somebody who is a mass murdering killer? Well, you talk about their infectious, swashbuckling laugh, don't you?
Loved Lindsey Graham.
He loved him.
Impossible not to like him. That swashbuckling, infectious laugh, that attitude, that
demonic
passion that so many others have talked about. Lindsey Graham was impossible not to like as a human being and, of course, as a United States Senator.
I think he was a vile human being, and I think that his laugh was demonic. And then, of course, Sean Hannity, speaking of demonic, Sean Hannity has got him in heaven. Listen to what he thinks heaven is like.
There ye may be also. Lindsey, Mr. President, I would argue in my mind, probably has a heavenly version of Mar-a-Lago.
Who needs heaven when you got Mar-a-Lago, right?
He may have a little more gold in the Oval Office in his mansion in heaven. And I wouldn't be surprised if he added one big, beautiful ballroom and an arch somewhere on the property. Because he would want to obviously duplicate his dearest friend in life, you, Mr. President.
Yeah, he doesn't want to glorify Christ. I mean, we want to glorify Trump, right? That's what heaven's about. Heaven is about glorifying Trump. Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene is looking at this, and you got Vladimir Zelensky, Netanyahu, this is RT's characterization of it, led a procession at Graham's funeral as they sought to realize Graham's lifelong ambition of dragging the U.S. deeper into catastrophic foreign wars that he never personally got involved in. So Marjorie Taylor Greene looks at it, and she says, look at this cartoon that's being put out at the time by the White House, the Trump White House. She said they are completely out of touch with the issues that are harming Americans right now. And it's true. Look at this. You got Diet Coke, 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. You got to spell that out for the MAGA people. There's the UFO thing. This is like a Simpsons commercial, because that's what the president is like, Simpsons commercial. Yeah, the problem is this is a presidency that is based on AI slop. And I don't mean that just from the garbage cartoons that they're creating. I mean the kind of AI slop that is bringing us a police state. He doesn't depict that. He's having fun with the next distraction that they've got queued up, which is the UFO distraction. We're going to take a quick break, folks, and we've got more to say about the actual war, not just about the warmongers who are dragging us into this war. We will be right back. Stay with us.
Plant the seed in our homeland, boys. Let it grow where all can see. Feed it with our devotion, boys. Call it the Liberty Tree. It's a tall old tree and a strong old tree. And we are the sons, yes, we are the sons of liberty.
listening to The David Knight Show.
Welcome back. And a couple of comments here on Rumble. AP Rumble Seat says, well, if Orange Man's regime has their way, search warrants will be a thing of the past. Keep an eye on legislation and on executive orders. Absolutely. This should be something, folks, that is an issue in your local elections as well. I've reached out to some people running for governor as well as other offices here in Tennessee. I'm asking them for their position on these flock cameras and on these so-called data centers that are surveillance centers. That is key because, Trump is going to be throwing all kinds of wads of cash at them to incentivize this and to bribe them to put in his police state. And most of the politicians are going to be more than happy to take that money, just like they did during the COVID lockdown. It's the same game, the same playbook done over and over again. And he'll distract people with wars and economic hardship and everything else that he can come up with. AI slop, you name it. It's all going to be that way. We also got a comment here from BlueMax55. He says, does anybody know the total dollars spent on the COVID scam? I heard that it's upwards of $6 trillion. Well, I really don't know, but in a sense, it's almost a disservice to put a number on that. I mean, the costs of this are astronomical. How do you put a cost on something where somebody has had a mom and pop business on Main Street and they've had it for decades and Trump destroyed that business with his lockdown? How do you put a dollar price on that? I don't think you can put a dollar price on that. How do you put a dollar price on a lost loved one from his shot? How do you do that? I mean, we can look at what happened with the disruption of the supply chains, the absurdity that was happening with that. People couldn't get toilet paper. You couldn't get food. You had, at the same time, the grocery stores were empty. You had the farmers were destroying food in massive quantities on their farms because they couldn't get it to market, because it wasn't in the right format, or because they shut down the businesses, and the toilet paper industry had a large amount of toilet paper that people would access when they went to businesses or things like that. It wasn't the home market, and the format that the toilet paper was put out in was not something that was sufficient to supply everybody, because, I don't know what percentage it was, but let's say maybe 40% of it was toilet paper that was consumed institutionally on those giant rolls that you see that are there. And so, Trump did that. And of course, he didn't learn anything from it, unless he did learn something from it. I mean, I am increasingly of the belief that Trump was handpicked to run this chaos that is going to take us into a global depression, global economic meltdown and reset, and to take us into a war. As I said before, I think he's a one-man fourth turning. Global depression and global war. And if you want to do that, you start doing the kinds of stuff that he did with the tariffs. And we're going to talk about that in a moment here as well. But one last thing here, and this is, we're talking about cartoons and AI stuff. Well, I see your cartoons there at the White House. Here's one that somebody put at the Lindsay funeral. You had Netanyahu and Zelensky leading the procession of this cult of death that was there. And after Trump made his statements about how Lindsay never saw a war they didn't like, he walks down and he touches the casket. Well, somebody took it from there. He was touching the casket, but it falls over. And there's a Lindsey Graham corpse dressed like a fairy. He went just before he died, he went to Disney World. And then he turns this into a death ray, which couldn't happen to a better group of people right there. Okay, so I was rolling on the floor laughing when I saw that. I thought that was even funnier than the real pictures of Lindsey Graham at Disney World standing outside the ladies' room. Little kids are there. It looks like he stole their wand from them, a fairy wand that was there. But somebody picked up that and ran with it. So what happens in the case of an American ground invasion of Iran? I pointed out yesterday that retired Colonel Douglas Macgregor pointed out that it is a 4-star retired Marine general who's now going on talk shows talking about how, this is what we have to do next. We've got to have a ground war. And he pointed out this is the same 4-star Marine general who was the one who ran this fire drill of retreat out of Afghanistan that cost many people their lives. It was a total failure with that. And But anyway, at the same time, they're moving into the ground war. You see Haaretz and you see the finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, both of them saying, well, we don't want to get drawn into this U.S.-Iran war. Our best situation is to stay right here where we are right now. They start it, they draw us into it, then once it becomes a quagmire and it becomes a point of pride for this prideful, narcissistic president that we have, what has he got left? The war from the air is not working. They're not bombing in a way that is working. And so the next thing that they could do, really the only thing they can do, is try to escalate into a ground war. But what will that do, really? Well, this commentary from MEHR News says it would drag the U.S. into a war of attrition and quagmire that's worse than Vietnam. And I agree with this. Many people have pointed out the obvious. This is as obvious as what happened with the Strait of Hormuz. Trump should have known that this would happen at the Strait of Hormuz, but he walked right into that trap. This is going to be another major disaster that many people are warning about, but he won't be wise enough to take that warning, I don't think. The occupying Zionist regime and the warmongering faction within the White House and Congress are pressing more than anyone for the direct entry of American ground forces. Ground invasion cannot compensate for the failures of the previous attacks and will only expand the dimensions of the catastrophe for the United States. A ground entry into Iran would be a new gamble from our casino president, in which Washington would confront a vast geography, an extensive defensive capacity, a national resistance, and the possibility of war spreading across the entire region, which is exactly what Israel wants. They want a regional or a world war for their project of Greater Israel to expand their land. This will not only fail to achieve America's already failed objectives, but it will trap America's military in a war of attrition that is costly with no exit strategy. A war that could repeat the quagmire of Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan for American policymakers and even assume deeper and more destructive dimensions. I played for you yesterday a clip from Robert Pape, who wrote a book that has been widely praised and used for policy, and it's sound logic. He looked at all these different wars that we've fought since World War II and how they have kind of focused on air power. He said, one of the lessons that we took away from World War II that was wrong was that air power was the predominant thing, and that we could win wars with air power. No, you got to get boots on the ground in order to win a war. And you also have to bomb in a different way than we bomb. You have to have a strategic bombing going after military sites rather than doing mass bombing of civilians, which is what is going on with this Iran war. And he put it at a chance of 70% that we would have boots on the ground. And he thinks it's going to happen pretty soon. And when you look at Trump, what has he got left? He's got to save face, by all means. He's got to protect his fragile, narcissistic ego. He can't back up. And he thinks that if he just goes all in and he wins this war, he can salvage American prestige. Well, he lost that a long time ago. He's already made America look weaker than any president has in the past. And if he goes into this and he loses it, it's going to be even more weaker. And we will be literally weaker. And we'll have a lot of lives that will be lost. But he will do it because he doesn't do economics. He does egonomics. And he doesn't do geopolitics. He does ego politics. And so I think he's going to do a ground war. So he pointed out in this article, he said, wars enter the ground phase when cheaper tools cannot achieve the political and military objectives of the war's architecture. So it should not be seen as a sign of American strength, but a ground war should be seen as an admission of strategic failure. You have to resort to the ground war because your air war is not working. It's not a position of strength. It is not only the Zionist regime that supports the expansion of this war. It is also influential lobbyists that are backed by the Israeli regime, such as AIPAC, that for years have worked to steer U.S. foreign policy toward Iran, and people like Lindsey Graham. And of course, one of the things is people are talking about the friendly nature of Zelensky and Netanyahu there. One of the things that Lindsey Graham wanted was more sanctions against Russia And they did that in his honor. I'm sure he would be so pleased about that, don't you think? Yeah, because sanctions really are an act of war if you stop and think about them. I said that about the lockdowns that Trump did. I said this is economic warfare against the American people. This is economic warfare against Main Street because he protected the big box retailers who trade on Wall Street, the people whose stock he can buy. He protected them, but he destroyed the middle class and many businesses on Main Street. And that is the purpose of what these people are doing. The biggest mistake of the architects of a ground war against Iran is that they see the country's geography only as lines on a map. You have to look at how mountainous it is and the different climates and so forth. An invading force will face severe difficulties from the topography alone. The U.S. military will need a constant flow of fuel, ammunition, food, equipment, and replacement troops as well. The harder it will become to protect roads, convoys, depots, and positions because of these difficult supply lines and the difficult terrain that is there. Air superiority and advanced technology will not solve this problem either. Nor can Washington bank on the imaginary collapse of Iranian society. They have, with their ruthless bombing campaign targeting civilians, they have solidified support behind even the Ayatollahs. The people in Iran see the Ayatollahs as a shield against an evil Trump America. This will be a quagmire deeper than Vietnam, Iraq, or Afghanistan. The U.S. has started wars before with a promise of a quick victory, and yet these wars were supposed to be short and low cost, turned into prolonged, costly, grinding conflicts. Iran differs from Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan in terms of size, population, defensive capability, and regional standing. It is a fool's errand. This is why Daniel Ratcliffe, Trump's director of the CIA, after Netanyahu and the Mossad director gave Trump the briefing, he looked at it and he came back and he said just one word. He said, it's farcical. Farcical. This is a farcical war. America will not only face costs on the battlefield, rising casualties and growing military expenditures, disruption in energy markets, pressure on regional allies, and the spread of domestic protests will gradually erode the U.S. government's political capacity. Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan showed that failure does not always mean defeat in a specific battle. Sometimes failure occurs when Washington, after years of war, thousands of dead, and enormous costs, is forced to withdraw without achieving its main goals. Well, Trump is boasting constantly about how Iran is constantly giving him a call. He is trying to, they're desperate to have a deal. They want to talk. And Iran said, no, we're not. And he kept on with the lies. And so the foreign minister of Iran, this is a great comeback to some of Trump's most obvious lies, says, yeah, we're calling you all the time. He holds up his cell phone. Here it is right here. He takes a picture of his cell phone so that you can see it. And what he's got there is a long list of Marco Rubio's at the top. There's all the phone calls he's gotten from Marco Rubio. There's no phone calls going out to Marco Rubio, and he's not picking up the phone to talk to him either. Marco Rubio is like a telemarketer from Trump hectoring Iran. That's what he showed in that. I thought that was a perfect comeback. I'm so sick and tired, frankly, of these absurd Baghdad Bob lies that we get from Hegseth and from Trump continuously. Well, China is going to be arming Iran with hundreds of man-pads, despite Trump's warning to China. What are the man-pads? Well, these are shoulder-fired air defense missile launchers. This is the type of stuff that we did with the Mujahideen. Remember that? When Russia got into their quagmire into Afghanistan, we went in, and that's where we created the Mujahideen, which then became Al-Qaeda, then became ISIS, then they renamed it to Al-Nusra. Then I forget what it's called in Syria, but we actually ran air support for these terrorists in Syria. And now they're in charge of the Syrian government. What do? They came after all the Christians and other minorities in the area in a horrific pogrom that was there, a genocide that was there, that Assad had never done in Syria. And that's the result of our policies. But of course, you had Lindsey Graham And John McCain, famously going around in the 1980s, John McCain would go around and he would, before Lindsey Graham got into Congress, Lindsey Graham didn't get into Congress until 1994. He came in with Newt Gingrich's Contract with America. How about that? I ran the next term against one of those people, Virginia Fox, who is still there, by the way. And I said, yeah, here's my contract with America. It's called the Bill of Rights. And here's how every one of the Bill of Rights is being destroyed right now by the federal government. Anyway, I digress. When we look at the MANPADS, that was a real game changer in Iran. When they gave it to these terrorist organizations, the Mujahideen, and John McCain would go around these Republican women's clubs and he would say, here's a guy, one of our fellows here, he's fighting our Russians. He wants the Russians. He wants to kill all the right people, like Lindsey Graham. And he says, you want to adopt a Muj? That's what he would call it, adopt a Muj. So give us some money and we'll channel this to these terrorists. And then in a few years, we'll tell you that they took down the World Trade Center. So Iran is expected to receive within weeks the first shipment of up to 400 Chinese-made shoulder-fired air defense missile launchers. Meanwhile, there are reports after report coming from people inside the Pentagon telling mainstream media that the U.S. weapons stockpiles are continuing to dwindle with a permanent end to the Iran war nowhere in sight. That's the headline from CNN. The tough guy is saying that we're going to finish this war. As a matter of fact, the White House put out this disgusting, I think, video about finishing the fight. Look at this. Yeah, there's the Dark Lord himself. Cue the breathing from Darth Vader.
People are asking me, please, Mr. President, we're winning too much. We can't take it anymore. We're not used to winning.
Enough of that childish propaganda. Yeah, we're winning. As a matter of fact, he's won the Iran war more than 30 times now, according to him. I can't take it anymore. I'm sick of the lies. Please stop telling us that you're winning. That's what we're sick of. We're not actually winning at all here when we look at this. Nearly half of Americans, as a matter of fact, want Netanyahu arrested in the latest poll. And as I mentioned before, you could tell that Netanyahu was in town because Fetterman was wearing a suit instead of a sweatshirt and shorts. Some 49% of Americans think the U.S. should arrest Netanyahu for war crimes. That the U.S. should enforce the International Criminal Court's warrant for his arrest. 49% say yes, arrest him. 27% said no. 23% were unsure. How about that? And yet, at this death cult funeral, you could see that War Pete was taking his orders. War Pete and Marco Rubio were taking their orders from Satan Yahoo himself. Look at this. He's holding court there and telling them what they've got to do. Yeah, no. Yeah, there's Pete Hegseth. Disgusting, isn't it? In almost 3 years since Israel began bombing Gaza civilians, Israel has also struck Iraq, Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen, and now Iran as well. Yeah, it's not just Gaza. They've attacked 5 other countries. And just look at what they're doing in Lebanon. It's absolutely criminal. So you got 5 countries in 3 years. They're dragging us into this. This may be one of the reasons why you got about 50% of the people want Netanyahu arrested. So how do they respond? Do they change the course of what they're doing? Oh, no, absolutely not. They double down. And what they do is they take their propaganda account to do PR for the state of Israel. They go from 7 million, which is what they had before they started all this Gaza genocide. They're going from 7 million to over 700 million. I think it's 730. Support for Israel has traditionally been strongest amongst Republicans and the elderly. However, 43% of over 65s now back arresting Netanyahu, according to Tuesday's poll. As a matter of fact, the sad thing about it is that it's over the over 65s, my generation, I guess, that are there's more people who support Israel than don't, and that is the only generation that does. It's pathetic. Whatever happened? Come on, guys. I grew up in the same influences as you did. Why can't you figure this out? Support for the Israeli prime minister's arrest is lowest amongst self-described MAGA Republicans. Only 21% want Netanyahu arrested. Again, if you call yourself MAGA at this point, that certifies that you are a clueless sheep. Nobody would want to call themselves MAGA if they have a clue as to what is going on. Let's talk a little bit about economics before we run out of time here. We had yesterday the Federal Reserve announced that they were going to leave interest rates where they were. Some people thought they would raise them. Some people thought they were going to lower them. Part of that is because the new guy that Trump has put in, Kevin Warsh, doesn't like to give any advance signals or guidance about where he's going to go, even with the next one, even when it's just a couple of days out. So everything is a complete surprise with everybody. But he stayed where he was, which the markets in general interpreted as a weak response and say that was going to be inflationary. But that wasn't the only thing that happened. It was overshadowed by other events as well. One of those is the fact that Brent oil jumped back up above $90 after Trump threatened to hit Iran hard. And we showed that headline yesterday when Gerald Celente was here. Trump screaming out, "We're going to beat the effing crap out of them, right? And we'll be hitting them hard, and we're going to give them a beating." Well, if all this profane talk worked, we would be winning. But the reality is we aren't. And you can do all the videos that you want out of the White House showing Trump as a tough guy and claiming that you're winning, but we all see what is really happening. We understand what is really going on. So it jumped almost 8% as he's doing this tough talk. Iran targeted a U.S. base in Jordan, according to a report from Axios. The U.S. Central Command said the missiles were successfully intercepted. Wait a minute, I didn't think they had any missiles left. Weren't we told that many times? We remain exceedingly skeptical that we're on the brink of a major diplomatic breakthrough that will resolve the nuclear standoff that started this, said the head of commodity strategy at RBC Capital. Yeah, I remain very skeptical about that as well. And I showed you the Marco Rubio telemarketer hectoring of the people in Iran. They're not interested in talking. Why would they? I mean, this is something that they can wait out. The U.S. can't wait it out. Iran-allied militias in Iraq also launched drones at oil facilities in Saudi Arabia. Wait a minute. I thought we won that war in Iraq, did we? Oh, no, that didn't work out too well either, did it? So now one of the places that we went to war for Israel for is now attacking our new ally, Saudi Arabia, that we want to give nuclear weapons to. Iran's Houthi allies in Yemen said Monday that they were targeting Saudi pipeline infrastructure, which transports oil to the export terminal on the Red Sea. Riyadh is relying on the pipeline to export its oil as shipping through the Strait of Hormuz has stopped. Iran and the Houthis are trying to control ship traffic through Hormuz and through the southern Red Sea as well. 2 choke points, and if they do that, we can imagine what's going to happen to the economy. Meanwhile, the stock market itself yesterday dropped 1,100 points. The worst day since April of last year on fear that the Fed is falling behind on inflation. Let me just say that a 25-point basis jump, which is typically the way that they move these things, if they'd gone up a quarter of a point on that, that wouldn't have made any difference. Not with $40 trillion debt and the interest charges on that. That would have been minuscule in terms of trying to stop inflation. It would have been significant if they had cut it. It'd be significant savings for the Trump regime. That's why he's pushing so hard to have interest rates cut. The Fed kept to the sidelines on its latest rate decision, and the bond market responded with a 10-year Treasury yield jumping by 7 basis points. The 30-year Treasury yield soared 10 basis points above 5.2%, hitting the highest level since 2007. You see, when they do these, even when they raise the interest rates, or when they lower the interest rates, I should say, it doesn't cause the 30-year mortgage rates to go down. They go up. Why is that? Well, because that is set by the marketplace. That's not set by an edict or command from the Federal Reserve. And these people are looking at it saying, well, if you're dropping interest rates, and that means that we're going to have more inflation, so I need to get a higher yield on my long-term bond of 30 years. And so that's what's really at play here. Adding to inflation concerns with a jump in oil prices. after Trump said to a Fox News reporter the U.S. is going to be hitting Iran hard. Of course, that's not exactly what he said, but I give you the idea of what he said. In response to surprise attacks on troops in the Middle East. South Korea is really where the story is economically, though, folks. You got authorities there are scrambling to save the stock market from the AI bubble. One of them in the opposing party said, this country has turned into a casino. Do you think we could say that about America? Trump's casino. Yeah, make America casino again. The U.S. and European stock markets might be the nub to the enormity of the AI bubble at this point, but in East Asia, it is a different story. In South Korea, the AI bubble appears to be bursting. The Korean chip maker, SK Hynix, failed to impress investors despite reporting a 6-fold increase in quarterly earnings. So we're really in a bubble when that disappoints people, isn't it? 6-fold increase in earnings, and they were upset about that. Across July 28th and 29th, the last 2 days, I don't know what's happening today, the Seoul Economic Daily reports widespread panic triggered not just one, but 2 circuit breakers. They have the same type of thing that we have here. If because you have automated trading and so forth, it's also monitored. And if the stock market starts to move really, really quickly, especially in down direction, what they do is they stop the trading for a period of time to cool it off. They did that, and then it went down so rapidly again. They did it a second time. They said that they have only had this is the first time they've ever triggered 2 consecutive circuit breakers. It's only the 15th time that they've ever had that in the history of the Korean marketplace. So they've only had 15 times that the circuit breakers have hit, and they hit twice on the same day. The South Korean government has scrambled to implement cooling measures and to prevent an all-out financial crisis. Government officials are now convening an emergency meeting to talk about additional things. That's why the opposition party came out and said, this country has turned into a casino. Well, we are turning into that as well, because we're run by a guy who has bankrupted 6 casinos himself. So again, Kevin Warsh is a guy who doesn't give any advance notice about where he's going on all this, and a lot of people were complaining about that. But he's also somebody who's going to do exactly what Trump wants, and I always think that it's interesting that his father-in-law is the guy who is head of heir, I should say, of the Estee Lauder perfume fortune, and he's also president of the World Jewish Conference, and he's out there banging like Khrushchev. He doesn't pull his shoe off like Khrushchev. He doesn't bang on the podium like Khrushchev did with his shoe, but he's out there banging about the fact that we got to punish anybody who criticizes the state of Israel. And he's not the only one who is doing that as well.
Target Jewish students, your actions will not disappear into the darkness. We will shine a light on you.
Shyster
Thanks
light.
to Google and SEO will follow you for the rest of your life. When you look for a job, when you look for a spouse, when you look for a nanny, when you look for anything, our work will always be documented. Again, thanks to Google and SEO. In corporations where DEI leaders smeared Israel, excused Hamas, we pressured CEOs. Some resigned, many were terminated, but policies were changed, thankfully, from governmental to art institutions. Online, where anonymous accounts spread violent threats, we traced patterns, elevated evidence, and worked with.
I got to say, nothing makes me angrier than to see some Jew standing up there in front of the Israeli flag talking about how they're going to punish anybody who criticizes their government. How dare you come after the First Amendment and my God-given rights of free speech? You disagree with me politically and you're going to destroy my life? That's what these people are about. That's why we must oppose them. We absolutely have to oppose people like that, whether it's Kevin Warsh's father-in-law or that woman right there. It is always the people who are opposition to free speech, folks, is the hallmark of a tyrant and tyranny. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day. The Common Man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.
Though he was take